my parents said. "You're nothing without us," and took my car keys, so I walked out silently. 3 weeks later, I pulled into their driveway in something they never expected. The words hit harder than they should have. "You're nothing without us." It wasn't even the first time they'd said something like that, but this time was different. This time, I heard it for what it really was, not concern, not tough love, but control. Fear disguised as parental wisdom. I didn't shout back, didn't throw anything. Just stood there. Still. Quiet. Like something inside me had finally stopped fighting. They'd already taken my car keys by then. My dad's face was flushed, his voice tight with that same old fury he carried like a badge. My mom sat at the table with her arms crossed, watching like she always did, passive when it mattered, loud when it didn't. "You don't just get to leave every time you don't like how we do things, Ryan," my mom said like I was 15 again, skipping curfew. I was 23. No drugs, no arrests. I had a job kept to myself. But they still treated me like some failed project they couldn't bear to admit had grown up without them. I walked to my room without saying a word. I grabbed the duffel bag under my bed, the one I kept half-packed because deep down I'd always known this day would come. Tossed in a couple changes of clothes, my laptop, and the old flip phone I never got rid of, because if I was really leaving, I wasn't taking anything they paid for. By the time I came back downstairs, bag over my shoulder, neither of them said a word. I opened the front door. My dad followed me halfway to the porch, expecting a fight, maybe a plea, some final insult to win the argument. But I didn't look back. I just walked. And kept walking. The first night I slept behind a closed-down tire shop on the edge of town. I didn't have a plan. I didn't even have a place to crash. My phone was dead, and the little bit of cash I had in my wallet wouldn't even get me a motel room, let alone a new start. And the duffel I packed with so much resolve earlier that day suddenly felt like it weighed 1,000 pounds. I woke up to the sound of delivery trucks backing in, my back sore from the concrete, my mouth dry. The heat was already rising. July in Georgia doesn't wait for anyone. My shirt was stuck to me with sweat, and I knew I had maybe 2 days before this turned into something I couldn't crawl out of. But I wasn't going back. No matter how bad it got, I wasn't going to give them the satisfaction of being right. I'd rather rot in an alley than here. "I told you so." Over coffee. The second day I walked until my legs throbbed. Construction site after construction site. Diners. Hardware stores. Gas stations. Anywhere with a help wanted sign or even just a tired face behind a counter. Most didn't give me a second look. One guy laughed in my face when he saw my duffel. "You homeless?" he asked, smirking. "Ain't got time for that." Finally, near the industrial park on the west side, I met a guy named Leonard. Heavy-set, sunburnt, missing half a front tooth. He ran a warehouse crew moving parts for farm equipment. "You strong?" he asked, looking me up and down. I said, "Not yet." He nodded and tossed me a reflective vest. "I'll give you 3 days. You don't die or quit, maybe we'll talk full-time." That night, I curled up behind a generator, drenched in sweat and diesel fumes. My hands blistered. My knees screamed. But for the first time in my life, I was proud of something. Not because I'd done much, but because I was doing it without them. On the 5th day, Leonard handed me a 20 and said, "You stink worse than the loading dock. Go grab a hot meal or a motel shower. Your call." I chose the meal. I walked into this rundown diner on the edge of town called May's Place, the kind where the floor tiles never stop squeaking and the coffee tastes like it's been sitting since 1997. I sat in the back, trying to stay invisible. My shirt was stained, my boots caked with mud, and I probably looked one wrong word away from snapping. But the waitress, a woman in her late 40s with a smoker's voice and kind eyes, just smiled and brought me extra eggs like she'd known me all my life. That's when he walked in, Julian. He was all pressed shirt, laptop bag, and smooth confidence. He stood out like a sports car in a junkyard. He sat in the booth next to mine and started making notes on a tablet, murmuring to himself. I wouldn't have paid him much mind, but the screen lit up with rows of code. Python. Django. I knew just enough to recognize it. I had done some freelance coding in college, back-end stuff, mostly. I didn't have a degree, but I had the skills. I glanced over one too many times, and eventually he looked up. You code? I nodded. A bit. He smiled, half amused. Know what a webhook is? Depends. Are we talking GitHub or Stripe? His eyebrows rose. Sit. Just like that, I slid into his booth. He was a software consultant from Charlotte, stuck in town after his car broke down. Needed a quick back-end fix on a project that had to be demoed in 72 hours, something his junior dev botched last minute. I'll pay you if you can clean it up before Friday, he said. I don't have a laptop, I admitted. He looked at me, then slid his across the table. Now you do. I didn't sleep for the next 30 hours. I coded from that diner booth until the waitress started calling me honey and bringing me coffee before I asked. By the time Julian came back, the app was working, cleaner and faster than it had ever been. He stared at the screen for a long moment, then grinned. You're better than half the guys I subcontract. He paid me $800 on the spot. That was more money than I'd ever seen in one place, and just like that, my rock bottom cracked open. And light got in. I didn't blow the $800. Tempting as it was, a motel room, a decent meal, even a second-hand phone, I used $20 to buy a burner from a corner store and stashed the rest. I set up a clean Gmail, rebuilt my old Upwork profile, and found a 24-hour laundromat with decent Wi-Fi and a nearby power outlet. That plastic folding chair and humming vending machine became my home office. I slept on warehouse pallets during the day and coded through the night. I took on anything: scraping tools, bot detection tweaks, Shopify themes. Whatever people would pay me for. Half the gigs didn't even care if you had a degree, just if you could deliver. Within a week, I landed a job for a small business in Tampa, rebuilding their appointment scheduling tool. They were offering $1,500. I stared at the email for an hour before I even replied. I worked on it nonstop. Literally fell asleep at one point with my forehead on the spacebar. But when I turned it in, the client left a glowing 5-star review and sent a $200 bonus with the note. You saved our launch. That's when it shifted. Julian reached out again too. He liked what I did and wanted to bring me on for part-time back-end support for his agency. Remote work, flexible hours. No small talk. Just code. In less than 2 weeks, I'd made more freelancing than I had in 3 months at the warehouse. Leonard wasn't even mad when I quit. Didn't think you were built for boxes, he said with a nod. Go do something real. By the end of the 3rd week, I had a PayPal balance bigger than I'd ever seen, nearly $8,000. I walked into a second-hand luxury dealership on the east side. The guy behind the counter didn't take me seriously until I showed him the transfer screen on my phone. I didn't need something flashy. I needed something that purred, that moved like freedom, that said you were wrong about me. I drove off in a sleek, obsidian black Infiniti Q60 coupe with red leather interior and a growl in its engine that made my spine tingle. Not brand new, but close enough. And I wasn't done yet. I didn't tell anyone where I'd been. No texts. No social media. I stayed completely dark for those 3 weeks, not because I was hiding, but because I wanted silence to speak louder when I came back. The car was spotless. The leather felt like confidence. I wore the only blazer I owned, paired with a crisp white shirt I picked up on a clearance rack and shoes so polished they caught the sunlight. I looked like someone they didn't know. That was the point. The Infiniti hummed as I pulled into my parents' driveway, tires whispering against pavement like it was a private joke. The engine idled low, expensive, restrained. It wasn't just a car, it was proof. I sat there for a moment, looking at the house. Same siding. Same porch swing that always squeaked too loud in the wind. Nothing had changed, except me. The front door opened. First it was my mom. She stepped onto the porch with that practiced expression of worry laced with expectation. A few seconds later, my dad appeared behind her. Hands on his hips. Like he was preparing a lecture. They had no idea what they were about to receive. I stepped out of the car slowly, deliberately, like a lawyer approaching a jury he already knew he'd won. I didn't say a word. Just reached into my pocket and pulled out the envelope I'd written the night before. It was 3 pages. Titled plainly, "How You Failed Me." No anger in the words. Just truth, sharp, clean, undeniable. I wrote about the manipulation, the gaslighting, the years of pretending I was broken just because I didn't become what they wanted. I reminded them of what they said to me. "You're nothing without us," and how I became everything without them. My mom looked like she was about to cry. My dad's jaw twitched like he was holding something back. Pride, rage, or maybe just surprise. They opened their mouths, both at the same time. I raised a hand to stop them. Then I turned, got back in the car, and reversed down the driveway without a single word exchanged. Not once did I look back. The drive away felt slower than it needed to be. Not because of traffic, but because I let it linger. Let the tires glide along the road while the silence in the car grew thick, electric. It was the kind of silence I used to beg for in that house, the kind that didn't come with tension, walking on eggshells, or the threat of another emotional ambush around the corner. Now it was mine. I thought maybe I'd feel something more, satisfaction, maybe a rush of triumph, but I didn't. Not yet. What I felt was clarity. Like everything that had ever been foggy about who I was and what I was worth had finally burned off under the weight of what I'd just done. There was no yelling. No screaming match. No apology drawn out of guilt or exhaustion. Just me, showing up as someone they could no longer ignore, and then leaving without offering them a single inch of emotional leverage. That letter. I didn't write it for them, not really. I wrote it for the version of myself that used to sit on the stairs and listen to them fight about how I wasn't driven enough. How I didn't appreciate what they gave me. I wrote it for the kid who got his keys taken away not because he did something wrong, but because they couldn't stand the idea of him leaving. And now I had driven away in a car they never touched. Paid for with money they never knew existed. Wearing clothes they didn't buy, headed to a life they couldn't take credit for. They would never admit what that day meant. But they'd remember it. Every time that engine revved in their dreams. Every time someone asked, "Hey, isn't that your son?" Every time they sat at that dinner table and saw the empty chair that used to hold the one person they underestimated. And that silence? That was the sound of me winning. The first real emotion hit me a few nights later. I was in a small apartment, a sublet with creaky floors and a stubborn heater, sipping cheap coffee out of a chipped mug I'd bought from a thrift store. The place was mine. Not because I owned it, but because every square inch of it was earned, untouched by guilt or control. I sat on the floor, laptop glowing in front of me, and opened my bank account. 5 figures. The kind of money that didn't just cover bills, it bought time. Time to think, time to breathe, time to finally ask the question I'd never been allowed to: what do I actually want? I didn't want revenge. Not anymore. What I wanted was space. To create. To build something I didn't have to explain to anyone. I started sketching out ideas for a small dev agency, just me at first, then maybe a designer, maybe a second coder if things grew. I wasn't chasing some tech giant fantasy. I just wanted something solid, sustainable, mine. Julian kept sending me work. Word got around. I started turning down gigs that didn't pay enough. That felt surreal, saying no without the fear of it all falling apart. Every now and then I'd get a text from my mom. Just little things. Saw your old sweatshirt in the laundry. Hope you're doing okay. We miss you. Dad still doesn't understand what went wrong. Come home for Thanksgiving? I never responded. Not because I was cruel, but because I'd said everything in that letter. They weren't asking because they understood. They were asking because the silence unnerved them. For once, I wasn't playing the role they'd written for me. And I wasn't going back on stage. Freedom, I learned, doesn't hit you like a lightning strike. It's not a movie moment, no swelling music, no instant clarity. It's quieter than that. Slower. Like air returning to your lungs after you didn't realize you'd been holding your breath for years. Some mornings I'd wake up and just lie there, staring at the ceiling, waiting for the usual tension to kick in, the one that came with living under someone else's roof. That background anxiety, like a low hum behind everything I did. But it never came. I was alone, sure, but for the first time, being alone didn't mean being lost. It meant being free. I could eat breakfast without anyone commenting on what I should be doing with my life. I could take on freelance projects I actually cared about, not ones that fit into their version of success. I worked late because I wanted to, not because someone expected me to prove something. And the weirdest part? I stopped thinking about them. Not completely. But the obsession faded. I didn't replay arguments in my head. I didn't compose imaginary comebacks in the shower. That version of me, the one who lived for their approval, who felt like a failure if he didn't hear, "We're proud of you," he was dissolving. Slowly. Quietly. I started going to this local co-working space a few days a week. Nothing fancy. Just a converted warehouse with bad coffee and great lighting. But there, I met people who were building things. Designers, writers, app developers. People like me. People who didn't care where I came from, only what I could create. One of them, Nora, ran a boutique design agency. She was smart, direct, and never once asked about my past. She hired me for a client's back-end system, and then another, and then we started meeting for coffee even when we didn't have work to discuss. She once asked me, in this offhand, almost distracted way, "Do you ever miss them?" I knew she meant my parents. I took a long sip of coffee before answering. No. I miss who I thought they were. That was the truth. I'd spent most of my life clinging to an idea of them, the version that maybe existed when I was 5, when I didn't know how conditional their love was. But the people they were now, the ones who said I was nothing without them, I didn't miss them. I pitied them. Because while I had rebuilt everything, piece by stubborn piece, they were still stuck in a house full of their own noise, still playing a script I had finally walked off of. Some nights, I'd take the Infinity out on the highway just to drive. No destination. Just open road and the hum of the engine. I'd let the wind rush in through the cracked window and think, this is what they were afraid of. They weren't afraid I'd fail. They were afraid I'd succeed without them. And I had. It was a Tuesday when the message came. I was working late, headphones in, lost in code, when my laptop buzzed. I flipped to my inbox expecting a client update, but it wasn't from any client. It was from my father. The subject line was empty. Just a plain, quiet name staring back at me. John Whitaker. The man who once stood in front of the door, car keys in hand, telling me I wasn't going anywhere without his permission. I hovered over it for a long time. Then I clicked. Ryan. I don't know what you're doing now, or where you are, but I hope you'll read this. Your mother hasn't been well. She cries a lot. She says she never meant for things to get so bad. We both miss you. We talk about you every night. I saw a car like yours the other day, black coupe, red leather seats. Made me think of you. I remembered the look on your face when you left. You didn't slam the door. You didn't yell. You just walked. I didn't get it then. Maybe I still don't. But I wanted to say I'm sorry. If you ever want to come home, even just to talk, the door is open. For a moment, everything stopped. I closed the laptop, pushed it aside, and leaned back in my chair. That old, tired ache started to crawl into my chest, the one that used to whisper, maybe this time will be different. Maybe they finally see you. But I didn't reach for it. I sat there and let the silence stretch, stretching farther than any letter could reach. I realized right then how far I'd come, not in money, not in reputation, but in control. I was no longer looking for a version of my parents that didn't exist. I had stopped auditioning for love. And even now, when they tried to hand me something that sounded like remorse, I knew it came wrapped in the same strings as always. Guilt. Expectation. A backdoor into my life. So I opened a new tab, clicked into my documents, and found the letter I wrote the day I left. I had saved a digital copy for myself. I reread it, all 3 pages, and when I got to the last line I smiled. I forgive you. But I will not return to who I was to make you feel better about who you were. That version of me, the one who stayed quiet to keep the peace, who mistook obedience for love, he was gone. I opened my email, hit reply, and wrote, I got your message. I hope you both find the peace you need. I already have mine. Please don't contact me again. I hit send. Then I shut the laptop, turned off the lights, and stood by the window. Down below, the city glowed, a million quiet lives humming in the dark, each of them learning, breaking, healing in their own way. And mine? Mine was just beginning. I used to think freedom was loud. Like roaring engines or standing on a rooftop shouting. I made it. I thought it would come with applause, maybe even recognition. That there'd be a moment where the world, or at least the people who broke me, would see me shining and have no choice but to say, we were wrong. But it didn't come like that. Freedom, I learned, is quieter than revenge. It's waking up and realizing you don't brace for footsteps in the hallway anymore. It's sitting down to dinner without flinching at the silence. It's hearing your name and not wondering what you've done wrong. I don't think my parents will ever truly understand why I left. Not really. They might rewrite it, soften the edges, say I went through a phase or needed space. That's fine. Let them. The truth doesn't need their permission to exist. The truth is, I loved them. And maybe, in their own way, they loved me too. But love without respect, without boundaries, without room to grow, that's not love. That's ownership. And I won't be owned anymore. Sometimes I think back to that moment, standing in the driveway, them watching from the porch, and me walking to the car like I didn't feel 1,000 things at once. And I wonder, if they ever replay it the way I do. If they finally understood that when I didn't say a word, I was saying everything. That walking away wasn't weakness. It was power. It was peace. It was choosing myself for the first time in my life. To anyone listening, maybe sitting in a bedroom you're afraid to call your own, maybe holding your breath every time your phone lights up, I'll tell you this. You are not selfish for wanting peace. You are not cruel for walking away from people who hurt you. You are not broken for needing to start over. Sometimes the loudest way to change your life is to say nothing at all. Just pack your bag. Walk out. And build the world they said you'd never survive in. Because when you finally do, when you pull back into that driveway in a car you bought with your own 2 hands, and they step outside expecting the child they used to control, they won't recognize the person you've become. And that's the real victory.